Hello, my name is Ethan Kaiser. I am a scientist and an atheist. And my question is, since the Bible has been scientifically disproven as far as all the claims, the theory of evolution, archaeology, Noah's Ark, Adam and Eve, since we know this didn't happen because of our science nowadays, my question is, how do we have, according to the Bible, how do we have free will if God is this omniscient being that knows everything about us, everything we will do, and he pretty much knows our outcome before we're even created? So he creates us knowing everything we'll do. Since we can't surprise him by our actions, we have no free will. Our choices have been predetermined, and that the act of judgment is completely immoral because he knows what we're going to do. Nothing can surprise him. That's my question.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure whether I want to reply to the first bit of it or the second bit. I would want to say that I don't agree with the first bit, that the Bible has been conclusively disproven. I think that there are a number of eminent scientists, historians, archaeologists, and others who have a robust and well-respected Christian faith. Theism is not a view that is in the retreat, like sometimes we want to suppose it is. In fact, for me, part of my journey as an atheist, sort of agnostic Buddhist, when I arrived at university to study philosophy, became president of the Philosophy Society at the university that I was at, I expected to see within philosophy that atheism, naturalism was mopping up and that the battle would be over. In fact, the incredible thing that I saw was that theism was not only a widely respected view within philosophical reflection and investigation across the Western world, but that it was also a view that was in the resurgence. During the 1960s and 70s, we had the Death of God movement, and it looked like theism was going to be pounded into the ground by naturalism, or by atheism. And in fact, what happened was that some of the fundamental questions, the presuppositions of scientific inquiry, the reliability of the mind, for example, the failure of the project of philosophical ethics to provide sufficient grounding for moral values, raised new questions about the nature of what science could answer and what theism could answer. And I would say that the theistic worldview is still very much credible, and those stories and illustrations that you mentioned would have credible and compelling, not only philosophical, but scientific responses to them as well. So that's the first thing I'd want to say. The second part of it, if you remind me, was
Ethan? My name or?
Free will, yes. Now, I think that there's a danger that we think that God's foreknowledge means foredetermination, predetermination. It doesn't seem to me to be a necessary connection to say that because God sees the way that we're going to make choices, that therefore we're not free in making those choices. It depends what action God takes on the basis of that foreknowledge. It's not a necessary connection to say that because God sees what is going to happen, that therefore we're not free in some way. There is, as you've, I think, put your finger on, a question of, okay, well, if God is in control of the world, then how can human beings be free? And this is a tension that theologians and others have recognized and are wrestling with. And the way that I begin to hold that together in my mind is that I think it's a bit like a river, where you have one riverbank that is human freedom, another riverbank that is divine sovereignty and God's overarching control. There's a raging torrent between the two, and we see both human freedom and divine sovereignty in operation at the same time. So I hope that's a beginnings of a reply to what you've raised. I think that I would say that the battle or the same tension between determinism and freedom also exists within naturalism as well. We have dispensations and inclinations and longings that are out of our biology or out of our history or out of our genetics. And at the same time as that, we think that we're free. I would want to argue that actually libertarian free will falls most naturally from a theistic worldview as well. And if we want to talk about freedom, then we need to recognize that that everyday view of freedom, where we see ourselves as free, doesn't necessarily follow from a closed mechanical system where everything is determined. After all, if we are simply biomechanical machines, how do you know that the very question that you pose to me isn't a result of a large chain of chemical reactions and processes, even to the point of compelling you to agree or disagree with the answer that I've given? No.
I'll just add real briefly, and it's a great question. It's a great question, and lots of my students and myself, when I was a student, spent lots of time writing on this question. But to what extent can we have foreknowledge? Can anyone have foreknowledge if people are free? And I just find this a bit helpful, that actually we also can sometimes foreknow the free actions of each other. If I give you the option of having pizza or a rat for dinner, I'm pretty confident I know each one of you well enough just from tonight that you're going to choose the pizza. You're going to do so freely. I haven't in any way causally determined your action. I know enough about you to tell you that. If I know someone better, then I can foreknow more about them. Sometimes Tom and I might be hanging out, and my goddaughter, his daughter, Mia, will be doing things, and Tom might say, oh, watch this, watch this. Okay, because he knows Mia so well, he knows what she's about to do. Not because he's causing her to do it, but because he knows her so well, he knows how she will freely act. Okay, likewise, in my family, sometimes you're around the dinner table and you just know the words that are going to come out of someone's mouth, especially if the Yankees are losing, then you definitely know which words are coming. So just to say, I find that a bit helpful because I think it's because, as a Christian, I think that God knows each one of us so intimately that, like us, he can have foreknowledge of ways that we would act freely, but even to such a greater extent. So that's just the beginnings of an answer, but I hope it's a bit helpful.
I'll give my footnotes to this and then make a closing statement, and we'll call it an evening. We've been on our feet for 2 hours. If you want to continue, we'll be happy to meet with you here. Thank you for the question, and before you go into an auditorium, if you give a sheet of paper and ask us to write 20 possible questions, that'll come. We've never heard a new one in all of these years that go by. They're pretty much the same questions. It's interesting that you began by saying, as an atheist, all of this has been disproved, and so you live with scientific materialism as your worldview. I studied under John Polkinghorne at Cambridge University. You probably know the name. One of the world's leading quantum physicists who came to exactly the opposite conclusion you did, while being the dean at Queen's College, Cambridge, as a quantum physicist, taking the same data you did. So obviously, for a man of his intellectual ability to come to a different conclusion, one would either have to say he's totally stupid to come to that conclusion, or else his empirical basis. Please don't keep shaking your head. Let me finish so that you can come and talk afterwards, so you'll allow us to concentrate what we're saying here. I want to read for you what David Berlinski says about the scientific naturalistic worldview. Do you know who he is? No. One of the world's leading physicists who is an agnostic, borders on atheism, but took issue with Richard Dawkins's book, The God Delusion, and wrote a book called The Devil's Delusion. Here's what he said. Has anyone ever provided proof for God's inexistence? Not even close. Has quantum cosmology explained the emergence of the universe or why it is here? Not even close. Have the sciences explained why our universe seems to be fine-tuned to allow for the existence of life? Not even close. This is Berlinski talking. Are physicists and biologists willing to believe in anything as long as it is not religious thought? Close enough. Has rationalism and moral thought provided us with an understanding of what is good, what is right, and what is moral? Not close enough. Has secularism in the terrible 20th century been a force for good? Not even close to being close. Is there a narrow and oppressive orthodoxy of thought and opinion within the sciences? Close enough. Does anything in the sciences or in their philosophy justify the claim that religious belief is irrational? Not even in the ballpark. Is scientific atheism a frivolous exercise in intellectual contempt? Dead on. Now, I didn't say that, all right? I'm not quoting myself. Please give me your name, sir. Ethan? Yes. Ethan, what you're wrestling with is not uncommon. Many people from a scientific and materialistic worldview will say what you've said and come to that conclusion. The problem is what you mispositioned was your concerned between determinism and free will. Your application could have gone in many different directions, but you came to that one for some reason, which I was unfortunate, I think. At Cambridge, I listened to a talk at the Lady Mitchell Hall in 1990 by Stephen Hawking. As you know, he can't speak, he uses a speech synthesizer. His whole talk was on determinism and freedom. And you know what he concluded? That the tragedy with scientific materialism, if we take its assumptions, is that we are not free, we are totally determined. That was the world's leading physicist at that time saying, the very thing you're asking of the Christian faith, he pinned on your backs as scientific materialists. You can go right online and trace it. Lady Mitchell Hall, 1990, somewhere around March, April, May, that time I was in attendance. And he said, the only escape I have is since I don't know what has been determined, I may as well not be. The whole auditorium moaned and groaned with an escape hatch that he gave for himself after telling us that we were completely determined. That's Berlinski's issue. That is actually even what people like Dawkins will concede, or Pinker. You read Steven Pinker and the others. So totally determined. So the question is, were you free to ask this question? Yep.
I don't believe any of us actually have free will because we are strictly material.
So you're actually, as a machine automaton, asking me this question?
We are all made up of our past experiences.
Okay, but you're not free then. You're not free. You're not making a truth statement.
My true statement. I mean, what I'm saying is our memories and our states.
No, hear me carefully.
Okay.
If you're totally determined,
Yes.
you're pre-wired to think the way you do.
Nature versus nurture. Yes.
Sorry?
Nature versus nurture.
Nature versus nurture.
Yes.
Regardless, the nurture may provide a different environment, but the nature is you're hardwired to come out with a certain conclusion. Out of flux, nothing but flux. You know, what you put into the computer, ultimately is going to come out. But you have to ask yourself, are you making a truth claim? If you are making a truth claim, you're rising above the bondage of total subjectivity. And the moment you claim a truth claim, you're violating determinism.